Community Board 1. Not hearing anything. Community Board 2. Community Board 3. Community Board 4.
Present.
Community Board 5. Community Board 6. Community Board 7.
Here.
Community Board 8.
Present.
Community Board 9.
Present.
Community Board 10.
Here.
Community Board 11.
Present.
Community Board 12. Community Board 13.
Present.
Community Board 14. Community Board 15.
Present.
Community Board 16.
Here.
Community Board 17. Community Board 18. Community Board, only 18, right? I'll start calling the agencies. Not updated on your side. Excuse me, can you save the document over there so I can get it over here, please? One second. Okay, I will call the names. I'm sorry, I'm not at my desk. If I don't call your agency name, please let me know at the end. Administration for Children's Services. Commission on Human Rights. Civic Engagement. Department of City Planning. Department of Consumer Affairs and Worker Protection.
Here.
Thank you. Department of Design and Construction. Department of Environmental Protection. Department of Buildings.
Present.
And who's it?
Damaris Valero, Department of Buildings.
Hi, Damaris.
Hi, good morning.
Morning. Department of Education. Department of Corrections. Department for the Aging. DCAS. Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. Office of Technology and Innovation. Department of Transportation. Department of Sanitation. Department of Social Services. Department of Youth. EDC. Emergency Management. FDNY. HPD. CAU.
Good morning, present.
Morning. Hi. Anastasia. MOPJ. MTA. Parks. PD. Probation. oath. Any representative from Con Edison or National Grid? Okay, I'd like to move right along since we've already lost some time. Hi, Kira, message noted. Since we lost some time, I'd like to move right into it. This morning, we have a representative from the Department of Consumer Affairs and Worker Protection to discuss a concern raised at the last meeting regarding the proliferation of smoke shops. I know that there's a lot of concern about the number of shops and that the department is at this time launched or has launched a lottery for licensing more stores. We have with us today Charlie Driver from the agency, who will talk to us a little bit about the landscape in which DCWP operates within this space, and then he'll take questions from us. Following that, we're going to have a presentation from Regional Planning Associates and the land use in-house team here at Borough Hall to discuss some of the data findings from the Borough President's comprehensive plan. So, Charlie?
Great, thank you so much. My name is Charlie Driver. I'm a legislative representative here at the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection. I'll get into sort of an overview of what we do relating to tobacco and electronic cigarette sales in the city, and then we can see what questions there are for me. So first, I just want to dispel, whether it's the assumption or the concept that smoke shops in this city are licensed. Smoke shops themselves are not official. There's no smoke shop license that my department issues. We issue two kinds of licenses relating to sort of tobacco products. One is a tobacco retail dealer license. So if you open a shop and you're looking to sell tobacco, you need to have one of those, tobacco retail dealer license. And the other is an electronic cigarette retail dealer license, which deals with any, e-cigarette, vape pen, things like that. Some stores have one of the two licenses, some stores have both. And then, of course, there are some stores that are operating without them, and we enforce them for unlicensed activities. So within those two licenses, the sort of enforcement that we do deals with a few different things. So it deals with, making sure that a store has a license, making sure that they post that license within the store, ensuring that they don't sell any products to minors, ensuring that they don't sell any flavored products as well. There's permissible flavors, including menthol, mint, and wintergreen, but other than that, you can't have, a chocolate flavored vape. So we also then additionally enforce, restrictions about the type of tobacco that can be sold, making sure that people aren't selling loose cigarettes, keeping everything in a container, and also selling above the price floor that is dictated by the code and by the state. And if you have any questions about the price floors or some of these regulations, I'd also refer you to the health department, which has a role on the sort of health side of restricting tobacco, where we work on the consumer side. So that's sort of what we do in terms of the way that we regulate, or exactly what we regulate. In terms of the licensing scheme, as I'm sure many of you are aware, there are caps on the number of available licenses in the city. Those were set a few years back, and the way that they were set was involved grandfathering in certain licenses. So when the law was initially passed to create the caps, which I believe was 2017 or 2018, the caps were established at 50% of the number of active licenses at the time. That said, at the same time, anyone who had a license at the time was allowed to keep their license and keep their license as long as they remain in good standing with the agency. So that's resulted in a situation where new licenses are not available because most, if not in most cases all, community districts in the city have a number of licenses that are higher than the allowable cap. We've seen attrition over the years from non-renewals based on businesses closing, or situations in which we've revoked licenses from people for violating our laws and rules. But generally, most places don't have any available licenses. There are a couple community districts in Brooklyn and a few more across the city that have recently gotten below the allowable cap. And that's the source of the tobacco license lottery that was alluded to in the introduction here. So in Brooklyn, Community District 5 has 11 available licenses under the cap, and Community District 16 has 1 available license under the cap. And DCWP is running a lottery between November 1st and November 30th to take new applicants to provide licenses just up to the level of the cap. And if you're interested in finding out, what the cap is in your community district and where you're at in terms of legal licensure, you can go to Open Data. We report all of that information every year as part of the lottery administration. So that's sort of the picture of licensure. And I have to acknowledge there are a number of stores that are operating without licenses. When there are unlicensed stores, we inspect them as we would any other any licensed entity. We go in and we will issue civil penalties for any regulations that are violated. And as a result, we continue doing that, and these are actually the tobacco and electronic cigarette penalties that we issue are among the steepest that our agency has. It's not uncommon for fines to get in the tens of thousands for an initial inspection, and over the course of multiple inspections for a non-compliant business get into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's a not insignificant sum of money. So when you are aware of a tobacco retail dealer or electronic cigarette retail dealer that's either acting without a license, selling to minors, anything that you think is suspect, we encourage you to submit 311 complaints. That really helps us, organize the complaints we're getting, not just from stakeholders, but from people in the course of their daily lives, to make sure that we are aware of stores and can go out and enforce them. When we receive complaints and we're able to corroborate the location of a store, we will send inspectors out to do an inspection. And we are very committed to the regulation of tobacco and electronic cigarette retail dealer licenses, both for licensed and unlicensed businesses. This license category generally is by far the most inspected license category that we have. It's also the source of most of the violations that we issue. We're very committed to dedicating enforcement manpower behind it. So please, let us know where you see issues with specific stores. So that's sort of a broad overview. I'm happy to jump into some questions. I saw one question: how are businesses informed that there's a lottery open for a license? So when we have a lottery, we publish it in the city record, and we contact you all, and we also contact business associations, other stakeholders in the business community as part of that outreach to make aware that there is a license. And to the extent that a license lottery doesn't necessarily fill all of the available spots. So I mentioned that in Community District 5, I believe, was the community district with 11 available licenses. Let's say we only get 6 available licenses. Those don't go away. We'll be able to then have another one down the line. Oh, and one more thing I guess I should mention is that licenses are restricted by location. So when we issue a license to a specific location, there are only a few ways in which that license can be transferred from that business in that date and time. So one is whether the business with the license is sold. Someone acquires 10% more of the shares, or there's a change of partnership. So that's a situation when a new license can be issued for a new business at the same location. But other than that, there's no way to move the location of a TRD, tobacco retail dealer, or electronic cigarette retail dealer license. If you want to move, your tobacco retail dealer business, you're not going to be able to get a new license when you do that. So yeah, happy to dive into questions that people may have here. And again, I encourage anyone who is aware of a non-compliant store in their district to report that to 311 so we can be made aware. Before a violation is issued to a business, does the business get the opportunity to correct the issue? I don't believe we have any curable violations within the tobacco or electronic cigarette code. I think there might be one or two relating to signage, but in terms of selling tobacco to minors or selling below the price floor, these are things that when we have new licensees, we do an educational inspection with them, go through the code, identify any violations that an inspector sees, on site that day before, being inspected for real. So, we do our best to make sure that businesses know the rules and regulations. Ultimately, the onus is on them to be aware. And when it comes to tobacco and electronic cigarettes, most of the regulations we have on the books are things that the people should really be aware of. So the minimum prices and not selling to minors and not selling loose cigarettes are all fairly straightforward things that we hope businesses aren't doing. Great. Any other questions?
Hi, hi, Charlie. So, one of the questions that we were concerned about is the number of stores within a specific range. Do you have a formula for how close stores can be to each other?
There's no specific restriction to how close they can be to each other.
Any restrictions as to what they can be close to? For instance, with the SLA licenses, they have to be 200 feet away from a church or a school, or no more than 3 within 500 feet without hearing at the SLA. Is there any such thing for the issuance of tobacco licenses?
Sure, I believe there are restrictions relating to store, like location to a school. But the restriction based on location and proximity to a school relies specifically on advertising. So if they're, advertising tobacco or electronic cigarette products within, I believe, 250 feet of a school, then there's no, they can't do that, and we can go issue a violation, but there's no specific restriction on the location.
Is there any mechanism by which the community boards or the community can comment for the issuance of these licenses?
I don't believe there's a built-in feedback system for this kind of license.
Are there any other questions? Can we just talk a little bit before, and I might have missed this in the in the battle to get my tech going. Did you talk about signage and what the signage that's required?
Sure. So the only signage requirement that we have is that they post the license. And they make the license clear, and they also post an age restriction sign, clearly showing that you can't sell to minors. There may, if you're talking about signage in the front of the business, we don't have any specific restrictions for that, but other agencies may, but I'm not really able to speak to anything like that.
So there's no signage required inside saying like, can it be sold to, Because a lot of
There is a restriction that you have to show that you have to have a sign that there's no sale to minors allowed, and you also have to have your license displayed for people to see.
And do you know who's responsible for enforcing things such as the sale of the cannabis items? Because for now,
Sure. Cannabis is entirely handled by the state at the moment. I would refer you to the Office of Cannabis Management, the state level, with any questions relating to that. DCWP has no role on cannabis. There's nothing we can do to enforce that at the current time.
so now we can, if we see the sale of cannabis in a local smoke shop, we can call PD to come.
You should refer your complaints to the Office of Cannabis Management relating to anything for cannabis.
Okay, thank you. Celeste?
Yes, good morning. This is Celeste, District Manager of Board 4 covering Bushwick. I just had a question in reference to the time frame from which a 311 complaint may be filed about an establishment from when someone from DCWP is responding. And then I guess from there, what is the timeline for when a violation is issued? So initial response and then time frame for when the actual violation is issued to the business.
Sure. I don't have a specific time frame beyond the general one that we give for 311 complaints. I mean, it sort of varies case by case. We have to look into corroborating things like and then scheduling an inspection. When we go out and do an inspection, we'll issue violations on the spot, and an oath hearing will be scheduled, as soon as the violations are issued. And then as a result, there's usually a month or two between when a violation is issued and when there's an oath hearing. But for the details of the oath process, I refer you to oath.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay, hearing none, I want to thank Charlie for coming on this morning. Really appreciate it. And hope to see you or another representative from DCWP at the meetings in the future. We're normally the second Tuesday at 10 a.m. But this month is special with tomorrow being a holiday. So thank you.
Yep.
very much.
Oh, thank you so much. Appreciate you, giving us the opportunity to speak on this. And look forward to, receiving your complaint through 311. Thank you.
Next up, in the interest of moving it along pretty quickly, I will take my colleagues from land use.
Thank you, Carol Ann. Yes, so thank you all for letting us speak today and provide a little update on what the comprehensive plan that the Borough President has been spearheading, what we've been working on. I just want to take the opportunity to thank RPA and NIAM, New York Academy of Medicine Regional Planning Association, for all their support for the last few months trying to get the data collected that we'll share here today. And that will also be coming out in print shortly. Or the report on all the existing conditions will come out shortly. And we definitely want to have, some of you probably already seen this at the Borough Board meeting, but certainly the agencies, we definitely would love to have your perspective on some of the data that we've collected and if you think there's any missing gaps in the information. But in the interest of time, I'll just turn it over to RPA to give just sort of a overview of what we've been looking at over the past few months. So Moses or?
Thank you. Thank you, John. Yeah, I'm going to share my screen. Can you confirm if it's showing? Good, Moses, it's all yours.
All right, thanks so much for tuning in and coming out. We wanted to just go over the comprehensive planning process that we're doing with the Brooklyn Borough Presidents. Next slide, please. So First, a little bit about us as Regional Plan Association. We are a nonprofit, non-governmental research planning and advocacy organization. We work in the tri-state area, which I describe as being everywhere the commuter rail goes, plus the watershed up in the Hudson Valley. And we encompass 782 municipalities, of which New York City is one of those municipalities. So if you think dealing with land use in New York is hard and planning, it's 781 other municipalities ranging from about 30 people to about 300,000 people adds another layer of complication. Next slide, please. So I want to talk about why we're doing this and why this is important. So New York is completely unique among its peers for not having undertaken a comprehensive planning effort. The last time we did so was in the 1960s and under Mayor Lindsay, and that plan was never even actually adopted by the city council. We have strategic documents, we have components of plans, we have a waterfront plan, we have a housing plan, we have a jobs plan. We've done Plan NYC, which is kind of the strategic document, but none of these things actually lay out what we want the city to look like spatially, physically, tangibly. And that's really where some of the hard decisions and hard conversations happen. It's very easy to say we want more jobs. It's very difficult to say, well, where are we going to put the factory? It's very easy to say we want more affordable housing, but when you get into where it's sited, what it looks like, how tall the buildings are, how affordable they are, that gets into a lot of tougher conversations. And without a guiding comprehensive planning document, there's no direction for those conversations. So Brooklyn as a borough, of course, doesn't have the authority that New York City as a city does. But it is the fourth largest, we all know, the fourth largest city if it was its own city in the United States. And this comprehensive planning effort is going to be the largest in the country since Los Angeles did theirs 20 years ago. And the reason why we're doing it is to inform the decisions and the positions that the Brooklyn Borough President can take on health, on land use, on housing, on what kind of things are needed in what kind of different neighborhoods. So it is for the Brooklyn Borough President, and it is going to be informing his decision making going forward. Next slide. So there's a lot that goes into a comprehensive plan, and anything you can think of that has to do with the city has to do with a comprehensive plan. But we're really focusing on two things most heavily here, housing and health, because everything affects health, and especially housing and health, we're really starting to realize how they go together. So several factors kind of shape both community health, neighborhood health, individual health. And good housing conditions and poor housing conditions are profoundly correlated to health conditions. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Marcel.
Thank you so much, Moses. Yeah, so I would describe that by large, this work has been an exercise in mapping. At this stage, we'll be including about 100 maps in the existing conditions report, and here's just a small snapshot of a few of the maps that we produced. So for the remaining minutes, what I'll do is I'll go through each of the categories and then highlight one example to give you a taste of what's included in there. The Borough President's Office also put together an advisory committee group representing local community-based organizations and nonprofits. We held a workshop to help inform the context and the narrative that we're writing as part of this report. The session in that moment wasn't intended to inform how we're to select the data or manipulate the data in any way. It was mostly the feedback that we got from that exercise was mostly intended to help us frame or contextualize some of these indicators. So as I mentioned, we grouped these 100 maps roughly in 8 thematic categories, which you can see here: demographic, health, socioeconomic, land use, housing, transportation, environmental, and neighborhood conditions. These are all based on federal, state, and local data sources. I think 1 or 2 examples are based on specific RPA data layers that we have available, but it's mostly federal, state, and local. And so one of the things that I think it's most evident and apparent as you examine all the maps, which was also apparent in this workshop that I mentioned from earlier in the summer, was the stark inequities and health outcomes that are affecting disproportionately communities of color. So on the left side, you see a map of life expectancy in purple shades of color, indicating those darker areas that have fewer years compared to the city's average, and those that are in pink and lighter pink have more years of life expectancy compared to the city's average. You can see where are those pockets or concentrations of communities that have lower life expectancy. And then on the right, you see a map showing the concentration of population of color, aggregating Black, Hispanic, and Asian. And you can see how those 2 maps resemble to one another. And this is just one example, but as you look at the other variables, you'll find a lot of these types of associations. So starting with demographic, the racial composition of the borough is about 35% white, which is shown here on dots represented in blue, 27% Black in green, 19% Hispanic in yellow, 13% Asian in red, and 2 or more races and American Indian adds to about 5% and represented here in purple. You can see the spatial distribution and the overlay of the district boundaries on top of that to have a sense of like what is that spatial composition on a more localized level. And if we can see that again, calling them the earlier map on the concentration of communities of color, they're mostly on the eastern half of the borough. And moreover, if we look at the similarity index based on Black and white population, which is a measurement that examines how to the extent to which each of these racial groups are clustered or segregated, we find that the measurement is about 77%, which indicates high racial segregation. If we move to the health section, like in this map, I'm highlighting the rate of adult asthma. And you can see that the highest rates of asthma are in central and eastern Brooklyn, in places like Brownsville, East New York, Eastern Crown Heights, East Flatbush, Carnegie. In those areas, you could see up to almost 15% of the adult population has asthma, compared to some of the other neighborhoods on the western side or downtown Brooklyn, northern Brooklyn, which typically have less than 8%. If we move to socioeconomic conditions, one variable that I feel is relevant is the location of service workers by their place of residence. So this includes frontline workers or workers in the service industry in general, restaurants, hospitality, those type of industries and occupations, which by the way have been very hardly hit throughout the pandemic. That's the sector that has the most loss in terms of jobs. And you can see again, like the concentrations of where those workers live in Brownsville, in East New York, Flatbush, Carnegie, Sunset Park. And this specific metric also correlates highly with other socioeconomic factors, including low income, high poverty rates, higher assistance, and the presence and where communities of color live. Moving to land use and physical conditions, the land use of the borough is quite diverse. It has industrial, commercial, a range of residential densities, but out of the over 250,000 parcels or individual lots, there's 276,000 of those. The majority of them are devoted to some form of residential use. About 155,000 of those lots are classified as one or two family buildings, which constitutes about 56% of all the lots in the borough. 93,000 are multifamily and mixed, and that adds up to about a third of all the lots in the borough. 5,600 are commercial and office, 4,200 industrial and manufacturing, about 5,600 vacant, and 12,000 are a mix of other kinds of uses. And you can see that for the most part, the higher diversity and the higher density of residential uses are concentrated on the northern half of the borough. On the southern end, that's where you see more homogeneity of low density residential uses, I should specify. In terms of zoning, this map is showing the zoning map amendments that have been made since 2002. And these changes have largely defined where housing is getting built or not getting built. And the two different colors in the hatches that are showing are distinguishing by the two administrations that oversaw those zoning map amendments. In red, we're showing the map amendments that were adopted during the Bloomberg administration between 2002 and 2013. And in blue, we're showing the zoning map amendments that were adopted during the de Blasio administration since 2014. And you can see the spatial distribution of those, but I would also add that a lot of the Bloomberg era zoning map amendments largely decreased allowable residential density as a way to preserve neighborhood character. And that has largely defined where housing is getting built, market rate housing, affordable housing, and all kinds of housing. And so this map is showing the changes in housing units over time over the past decade. And you can see how that's also been uneven, where northern and central Brooklyn have gained the most amount of units. Units gained are shown in shades of blue. So the darker the blue color, the more units have been gained by that census tract. And in orange, we can see places where actually we've seen a net decrease in the total amount of housing units. That's concentrated in some of the wealthier areas south of Manhattan or immediately west to Prospect Park, and you can see notable concentrations of housing unit loss. But for the most part, the borough's southern half has remained somewhat stable. Those geographies that are not highlighted in any color that are shown in white have remained basically stable without seeing losses or gains. And that again has to do a lot with the zoning map amendments from the past that I described earlier. When we look at specifically at affordable housing or income restricted housing, we can also see that the spatial distribution of city-sponsored housing has also been uneven, and largely also to the underlying zoning that allows for it or doesn't allow for it. When we look at the transit networks and the combination of all types of transit, including subways, commuter rail from the Long Island Railroad, subways, buses, and even ferries, you can see the spatial distribution where for a lot of these networks concentrate and interconnect in the downtown area and more generally in the northern half of the borough. You can see as you go further south, the accessibility to these transit networks decreases. I would also highlight the dotted red line that's crossing from Sunset Park into East Brooklyn, East New York, and then into Queens. That is known as a proposal known as the Interborough Express, which is existing right of way that has potential for passenger rail. It's not yet. It's not. The infrastructure is not built yet there, but the right of way would allow to do that. And this is a study that's currently being conducted by the MTA. In terms of transportation behavior, we can see the places in the borough that are more car dependent here highlighted in shades of orange, and those darker orange colors or red colors have a higher degree of vehicle miles traveled on a weekday basis per household. And so you can see that this map and the previous one correlate to a significant extent to where you see the places that don't have great access to transit are the ones that are largely car dependent and that use their cars a lot more than other parts of the borough. In some cases, up to 68 miles per day for every household. In the environmental section, in this map, we're highlighting the projected flood risk areas from coastal flooding. And so we know that sea level rise over time is going to increase the frequency of these type of storms, but also the depth and the extent of those coastal areas that will be affected by that type of flooding. And we can see, of course, that it largely affects parts that are in the southern half of the borough, but also coastal areas in and around Red Hook and northern Brooklyn as well. Just to say that this is not the only type of flood risk that can happen. We've also experienced in the past year events like Ida, which affected other upland areas, and so that will be. We also have a map that speaks about that type of flood risk, which is coming from extreme precipitation. But yeah, that was a super short overview of all the information that this existing conditions report will contain. Each of these categories has roughly from a dozen to 20 maps. So I encourage you to take a look at them, examine them. But we hope that this information will as Moses mentioned, inform future decisions and shape out, in general, the way that the city approaches its planning in general. Here are just like quickly the individual indicators or individual maps under each of those categories. Of course, we went deeper into the health section. That's the most robust section, and housing, I would add. But yeah, I think with that, like, happy to take any questions or open it up to discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcel. And just one more note. So like I said, we will plan to release the draft report for public comment shortly. And we also have a planned town hall on November 29th at Borough Hall. And we'll follow up with you all about details. But we'd hope for, like I said, to get your comments on this, where the gaps in the data, what information doesn't necessarily speak to you, how we could sort of contextualize some more of this information if you feel like it doesn't respond to experience, but we certainly want to have a set of information, shared facts. Borough President wants this to be a data-driven process, and like Moses and Marcel had spoken about, looking at making sure that the goals and outcomes goals and recommendations are meant to reduce the disparity in public health outcomes by basically race and income, and other factors that also contribute. But certainly we see some of those overlapping patterns from the initial data that we've seen. And so along with that, I'll just thank you all again for tuning in, and turn over to Carol Ann. Questions?
Thank you, John. Thank you, Marcel and Moses. I see you already have Eddie's hand up, so we'll just take questions from everyone. Just put your hand up in the chat so I can moderate that. Eddie?
Hi, good morning. Thank you for the very thorough report that you're going to be putting out. I just have a question or two, because I know that our community is in the floodplain, flooding. It's just we're the most southern part of Brooklyn that got hit by Sandy, and we know that we have certain things that came out of it from Sandy that we're still dealing with. I know that you mentioned about the health and the air quality and stuff like that. But with the Sandy, we came into some, I guess, roadblocks that the state is trying to do, but we're not. What's the word? In their catchment area, where they're talking about standard diesel problems from from the cars, and we're more dealing with the results of what happened with Sandy. Um, we're just trying to figure out how do we help our community that is an environmental injustice community that needs to be addressed with different needs that the rest of the community doesn't have. We can talk about this more offline because I know the rest of my colleagues know my feelings about this, but I think with Coney Island, it has a different, unique set of things that can't be explained in your report that is, cookie cutter for everyone else. But for us, we just have certain things that needs to be addressed outside of it. So I'll talk to John, because we spoke over the phone, but I think certain things that might need an asterisk just for Coney Island, so or Brighton Beach. But we can talk more about that in detail, John, in the future before the hearing comes, so that maybe it can be slipped in to say that the area needs to be looked at, that other things might have been overlooked.
Yeah,
Okay.
thanks, Eddie, for sure. And I'll definitely talk to you offline, but want to make sure that just we contextualize some of the work. So the recommendations that the borough president sort of envisions coming out of this are more focused on neighborhood typology rather than site-specific recommendations. So, of course, Community Board 13 has, a lot of strengths and challenges around, social resiliency and coastal flooding from storms. And there's a lot of planning efforts that have been going on in Coney Island. We don't want to disregard those efforts and certainly want to incorporate some of the work that's already been done in that area. Understanding that we have the Army Corps project coming up, the whole coastline of Coney Island would be affected potentially. So, we certainly want to make sure every community, is first of all engaged in this process, make sure that their voices, like you said, come to the table, but also we don't want to get in the way of planning efforts that are going on all over the borough, and want to make sure that we, empower the voices that are coming to the table there as well. So, but I'll definitely follow up with you, Eddie. We have a few other things to talk about too.
That was cool. Thank you very much. I think Celeste is next.
Good morning again, everyone. So I have a few questions that I could probably summarize. So they all kind of tie together, but I was curious about the engagement plan. I know you just mentioned trying to get as much feedback as possible. And so under my question about engagement was really, what is the overlap or analysis with local planning efforts? How is best for the CBs to kind of plug into this? I know you mentioned a town hall, but if for whatever reason, there are tons of meetings, it's hard to schedule anything. How else can we provide feedback? And then I guess the timeline for publication, that's like my first set of questions.
Yeah, thank you for those questions. Great questions. So the first, I guess, big picture for sure, especially the community board and agencies, I think we definitely would love to have your comments on the draft written report that we expect to come out later this week or early next week. I definitely, I think you all have a more, detailed eye on these things and have a lot of history that you bring to the table with a lot of information that, we may not have been able to capture with census data or any other, figures. We definitely want to hear some of your, feedback on this qualitatively. So we hope to have we just brought in a community engagement consultant to sort of work out these kinks. But we certainly want to have, we have this meeting, we have the town hall coming up. We'll incorporate all the feedback from those meetings, and then we'll start doing a little more targeted outreach early next January, looking at sort of roundtables around topics that have sort of come up in multiple conversations, look at other opportunities just to meet one-on-one with community board leadership, other agencies, and working with our advisory committee, which is it's like about 20 organizations from around the city and the borough, to help with sort of getting the word out and doing education with their constituents and their outreach to make sure that they are aware of what's going on. Is there other question I missed?
Yeah, no, that pretty much covers that first set of questions. And my second set, I guess this is like a future, maybe a little bit too early, but I think we all are very familiar with a series of plans that exist. And so knowing that we're still in the early stages and that we may have guiding principles that inform, the work that comes out of, what's happening the next few months, early next year. I'm just a little bit curious about implementation and if there will be like an action plan component or like an action item side to this, not just like, here's all this wonderful data that we have reformatted for you.
Good point. And all good planning involves implementation strategies. I think like Moses and Marcel said, I think this effort will be a little bit different than maybe the comprehensive planning legislation that's being pushed forward. That certainly would be the ideal scenario where we have an overarching city agency-led effort around these kind of issues. But certainly for Brooklyn, we didn't want to wait and want to make sure that, we, first of all, provided the public and Brooklynites with the information for their community, and that we are a resource certainly to community boards if on some of this information and collecting some of this data. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a little bit. Remind me your question again?
Yep. Implementation strategy.
Implementation, yeah. So like I said, I think we'll mostly be more about the borough president's recommendation on how he will approach different land use matters. So he sees, BSA applications, there's neighborhood planning that's already ongoing, ULURP items that come at his desk. So certainly we'll be using it for that. And the borough president wants to use this as an opportunity to say, look, if it falls within the plan, we're definitely going to, work with you and make sure that we can get you over the cross finish line. If it's outside the plan, it's going to involve a little bit more scrutiny in terms of projects come for his desk. So I think that's the big picture implementation. I think this meeting in particular, I want to thank again Carol Ann for inviting us as well to present here, because we will have the agencies here at the table, and we certainly want to make sure that, like I said, that their feedback's incorporated and that we can start to sort of implement some of these recommendations related to, pedestrian safety or sort of agency-led opportunities to plug in. So that's kind of what we're thinking right now, but absolutely willing to hear other ideas as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll be reaching out. I have some suggestions, very early conceptual suggestions for how to better align the district needs process and comprehensive planning. So to be continued.
Love it. Love it. Thank you. I'll put my email in the chat for everybody as well.
If I may just add quickly to that, John, like I would add that for the implementation of this, I think we're also looking forward to put this out, make it public, once the report is finalized, and make our other borough presidents jealous about what's happening in Brooklyn, and encourage them to be proactive in terms of land use and planning in general. And if that happens, and I think there will be more pressure to have like this in a more institutionalized manner, formalized way, to have like comprehensive planning in a real manner. But I think it has to come from other groups, other boroughs seeing the value of this and kind of being proactive about it. So we'll make sure to help promote that in other parts of the borough, of the city, but the region.
That's absolutely true. Thank you, Marcel. And we've already been, approached, and people are very excited about what's going on here across the city. So we're excited, and again, grateful for the team to help us here.
Anyone has any other questions? I don't see any hands in the chat. Okay, there are no questions. So thank you again, Marcel and Moses. Thank you, John, and the land use team for working on this. What do you call it? A capstone project. But I think it does point to Brooklyn's future getting brighter as we make more informed decisions about the way we do things and how our development goes. Uh, moving right along, we're still trying to catch up with time. Let's do updates. Do any of the district managers have an update? Wow, no updates?
I mean, if this is just what's going on in the district, I feel like I always have questions when it comes to this, but I guess in an overview, there are concerns recently about the concentration of nightlife in certain parts of our district. I think it's adding to tensions that already exist. So this is specifically off the Jefferson L stop. You may have heard or seen in the news last week that there was a press conference that was put together by one of our assembly members, Assemblywoman Maritza Davila, had community members come out to denounce the vandalism that appeared on a building that basically said kill elected officials. So it's concerning seeing messages like that just given larger events across the country. And obviously we don't want to see things escalate in any way, shape, or form in Bushwick. So I think that we are having conversations on the ground about how to address some of those issues that are leading to what could be a powder keg situation. We don't want to see it get out of hand. I know various elected officials are having conversations about what they can do. The board has also had internal conversations about what steps the community can take, right, to address any concerns with liquor license establishments. And we hope to continue a series that we started this summer. It was an interagency meeting for nightlife where we invited at least 7 agencies out, including the Office of Nightlife, to have a conversation about quality of life issues. PD was there as well, and we'll be continuing that. And then one other concern that may just be centric to Bushwick, but we're seeing tensions increasing in our parks as well as it becomes more of a children versus dog situation, or I guess people versus dog situation. It's unfortunate that it has to be framed that way. But alas, we have a limited amount of public space and we have a lot of folks in the community now that have competing needs. So again, trying our best to bridge the gap and make sure folks are informed about what our public spaces are for, trying to protect our public spaces while also making way for opportunities. I think one of the biggest concerns connected to that is the former Rheingold rezoning, where there was supposed to be a privately owned public space that is yet to be open, despite the fact that they have had tenants living in their buildings for at least 4 years, 5 years now. So hopefully we will get an update from city planning soon. But I think that that's the most recent news from District 4.
Celeste, would you happen to know what was the agreement for the building regarding the opening of the public space?
They got a density bonus for having open space. So they have their density bonus and their tenants rent. We still don't have a public space.
Was it supposed to open before or after the building went up? And if after, how long after?
I do not have that language in that contract. But I imagine that city planning would. So yeah.
Anyone else?
Oh, yes. It's me, Eddie. We have an update. I don't know if anyone heard about it, but we're not getting the ferry to Coney Island. It was brought before us by EDC at our last general board meeting, and they said it was too costly to dredge, and it was too costly to put it on the ocean side, and they were not willing to fork out at least $90 million to do the correction of this. So we're going at this time to say goodbye to the pier that they have already built and spent $7 million, and they're going to take it away from us. And it's so sad because people at the meeting said they do want the pier and they do want the ferry, and but they said no, we're taking our toys with us, and they're just leaving us flat. That's one thing. The second thing, which is interesting, is the Gaming Commission from New York State has put out or has started to get people interested about the casinos. We know that they're looking at Coney Island for one of the sites. And what's interesting is they've gone to all of our local partners, the community groups. And thanks to the Borough President's office, he's going to be helping us with getting a document together in the near future to give to the people to say this is what is needed in our area before they come to us and tell us what they're going to give to us. So we're hoping that if it does come, because it looks like it's a good chance that it might, but we definitely want to make sure the community gets what its fair share. So that's my update.
Thanks, Eddie. Anyone else?
I have
Amy.
a I have a quick, sorry, I have a quick question for Eddie. Are they taking the pier because it's more cost effective to just deconstruct it as opposed to maintain it? Or was there like another reason they're just take it just because they're not getting the ferry there?
It's because the funding was allocated to make it a ferry landing. And since there's no ferry landing, they're taking it back with them. Yeah, it's a shame because we asked our elected officials to see if they could repurpose it, to some other things, which would have been fine, like a boat launch, But of course, like you said, there won't be nobody wants to be in charge of the insurance, and liability of it. So, their way of saying we're taking it back. So we're pissed.
Thank you for that question, Celeste. Agencies?
Just quickly,
Hi.
before I replied to Celeste's question about the pops, I just posted some information that you might find relevant.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Afia from the Department of Health. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. No major updates. Just want to remind everyone to please stay updated on your COVID-19 vaccines, as well as your polio vaccine. If you haven't been vaccinated, please get vaccinated. Also, if you're traveling to a country that you may be susceptible of being exposed to polio, please consider getting a one-time booster before traveling. Update for MPV, expiration of the New York State Emergency Declaration. So MVP has expired. This does not affect people's ability to get vaccinated or treatment. The main way this affects people is that people ages 19 and older will now need to give consent to have their doses documented by the city immunization registry. This means not all doses will be reported in our data going forward. MPV vaccine operation. The city is transitioning MPV Vax from pop-up and mass vaccination sites into existing clinics and other community providers. Transition will be complete by November 14th. Starting November 14th, you can receive vaccines at DOH sexual health clinics and H+H acute clinic sites. People can continue using Vax for NYC to schedule appointments. And that's all the updates from the health department today. Carolyn, you're muted. Can't hear you.
Hi, thank you. So it seems like no other agencies have updates for today.
Hi, this is Frank Fontana of the Department of Buildings.
Thanks, Frank.
Hi, how are you? Just two quick updates. One is we are moving the Brooklyn Borough office to 345 Adams Street. So that's beginning November 21st. That'll be the new location. So for the time being, we're still at 210 Geralman Street, and the buildings after hours will still be hosted here until we move the office. So we, as of tomorrow, because of Election Day, the buildings after hours is closed. It will resume the following week. And then as of the last week, we do have a new acting commissioner, Kaz Velchik, who's a former first deputy. So he is now acting commissioner for the moment. And that's it. Thank you.
Can you repeat the name of the new acting commissioner, please?
I'm sorry.
Can you repeat the name of the new acting commish?
Sure. It's Kaz, and I can spell your last name. Just so it's a Vilenchik, so Vilenchik.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, so I am going to take privilege to come back on the floor to let everyone know, district managers, agency representatives, that next week, November 15th, we're going to be beginning the community board application period for the 2023 cohort that begins November 15th again and has a hard stop on February 14th. We will be sending out more detailed information. We'll be doing a social media campaign. We're going to have flyers. We're hoping to do workshops at library, because in order for our community boards to work, we must have boards that are truly reflective of the communities in which they're based. So for us to have that happen, we just need tons of applications. District managers, please, while we will be contacting members who opt for renewal, many in the last session did not reapply. We need them to reapply. If they did not reapply, they cannot be reappointed. So please, when you get the information, we'd really appreciate you passing it on to them as well. Oh, you know what? Our DIFTA rep didn't make it, and so she sent me her update. So I'll do that. Medicare open enrollment continues through December 7th. All older adults who have questions about their plan should call HICAP. Can contact HICAP through DIFTA's Agent Connect number at 212-244-6469. And DIFTA is about to have a name change. They'll be known as New York City Aging, and they have embarked on a publicity campaign called Join Us to encourage older adults to join or return to the older adult centers. More people are going out since the pandemic has sort of recessed, but the numbers still aren't up to where they used to be. And as we know, our adult centers for some are a primary source of socialization, which is extremely important for people as they age, to help them combat loneliness and depression. So that's all for now from Borough Hall. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your patience this morning as we work to finally get it together with our technology. Thanks to Bianca Stevenson, Community Board Coordinator, and our IT person, Jesus Marshall, who, although you couldn't see him, was working very feverishly to get the platform running. Once again, I appreciate you all. Have a wonderful weekend, and don't forget to vote.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Have a great day, all.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.